Baby, lean in for a moment because I feel this thing pressing on my spirit so heavy, I can't keep it to myself. There is somebody in this room, somebody watching this screen, somebody who has been carrying a silent longing so deep that even your prayers started sounding like whispers. You've been walking around smiling, showing up, doing what you're supposed to do, but your heart has been aching for something only God can deliver. And I hear the Lord saying, I see you. I know what you won't say out loud. I know the desire you buried because it hurt too much to hold. You thought you were overlooked, but baby, you were being observed. You thought heaven forgot, but heaven has been planning. You thought your season was delayed, but your miracle has simply been preparing its entrance. I feel a shift coming with your name on it. Not the kind you strive for, not the kind you have to manipulate or chase. No, the kind that interrupts your life, the kind that blindsides your doubt, the kind that leaves you saying, only God could have done that. Some of you are about to step into a suddenly, a breakthrough that doesn't knock politely, one that kicks the door open and says, I've been assigned here. God knows the desire you're scared to acknowledge. He knows the dream that hasn't died, just slept, and he is getting ready to breathe on it again. If you've ever wondered whether God remembers you, baby, this is your confirmation. A sudden miracle is closer than you think. There are seasons in your life when your mouth goes quiet, but your heart won't stop talking. Seasons where you learn to keep your desires tucked away because the world taught you that vulnerability invites disappointments. You learn to smile through unmet expectations, to clap for others while secretly wondering when your turn would come to keep walking forward, even when you had to leave pieces of your unspoken hopes behind. You didn't stop wanting, you just stopped saying. But just because you stopped speaking doesn't mean God stopped listening. There is something sacred about the desires you hold deep inside, the ones you don't tell your friends, the ones you don't post about, the ones you barely admit to yourself. Those desires are not trivial. They're not random. They're not accidental. They are connected to your identity, your calling, your becoming. God is the one who planted them in you long before life tried to talk you out of them, before heartbreak made you guarded, before disappointment taught you how to shrink, before setbacks convinced you to lower your expectations. Even when you tried to silence your heart, God kept listening to it because he knows you better than you know yourself. You may think your desire is small, but God sees the story behind it. You may think your desire is unreasonable, but God sees the wounds that shaped it. You may think your desire is impossible, but God sees the version of you that will rise when it is fulfilled. The same God who formed you in the hidden place still attends to the hidden places in you. The same God who knows the number of hairs on your head also knows the number of tears you never let fall. He is attentive to what you crave in your spirit, not just what you request with your lips. He doesn't just hear the words you pray. He hears the heartbeat that drives them. Some of the deepest desires you have were formed in seasons of lack. The desire to be loved well came from seasons of betrayal. The desire to be seen came from seasons of invisibility. The desire to be whole came from seasons of brokenness. The desire to be strong came from seasons of collapse. These desires were not born in comfort. They were born in struggle. And because they were born in struggle, they carry a certain weight, a certain urgency, a certain cry that only God understands. You may have stopped acknowledging your desire, but God never dismissed it. Heaven does not forget what your heart remembers. Sometimes you look at your life and think, God must not be paying attention. The way you've prayed and waited and worked and hoped, only to find yourself standing in another cycle of waiting. The way you've tried to settle your spirit when waves kept coming. The way you've tried to convince yourself that maybe this desire wasn't for you. Maybe someone like you doesn't get that kind of breakthrough. Maybe your story is just different. But your story is not a punishment. It's a process. And God is not ignoring you. He is preserving you. He is shaping you for the very thing you think he forgot. The truth is, God often waits until we stop trying to earn what was meant to be given. He waits until we stop negotiating with fear. He waits until we stop trying to prove ourselves to people who were never the gateway to our promise. He waits until we stop treating our desire as something shameful instead of sacred. He waits until we stop comparing our timeline with someone else's highlight reel. He waits until we realize that the desire we've been carrying is not a distraction. It's a divine clue to who we were created to become. There's a version of you that God sees that you haven't even met yet. A version of you that is bold enough to receive the things you were once afraid to desire. A version of you that can steward the blessing without losing yourself. A version of you whose faith is no longer fragile, whose trust is no longer conditional, whose hope is no longer borrowed. God sees the end of the story while you are still trembling at the middle. And because he sees what you cannot, he protects desires you thought he denied. He cultivates desires you thought he canceled. He honors desires you thought he ignored. You have to understand that God is not moved by how loudly you ask. He is moved by how deeply you need. He knows the desire behind the desire. You may think you want the job, but God hears the desire for purpose. You may think you want the relationship, but God hears the desire for belonging. You may think you want the breakthrough, but God hears the desire to breathe again. You may think you want the opportunity, but God hears the desire to step into who you truly are. He interprets your heart with a clarity you could never articulate. Even when you think you're being quiet, your soul is speaking volumes to God. Some people think God delays because he's undecided, but God is not wrestling with his plans. He's strengthening you for them. He's not uncertain. He's unfolding. Just because you don't see activity does not mean heaven is inactive. God has been arranging people, aligning timing, maturing you, closing doors that would have destroyed you, removing distractions that would have drained you, blocking opportunities that would have derailed you. He's been preparing what you asked for while preparing you to hold it, because if he gave it too soon, you might lose it too quickly. If he gave it before you healed, you might sabotage it. If he gave it before you matured, you might misuse it. If he gave it before you surrendered, you might idolize it instead of stewarding it. God's timing isn't late, it's protective. There are moments when you want to abandon your desire altogether, when you get tired of hoping, tired of waiting, tired of trying to reconcile your faith with your lived reality. But the reason you can't shake that desire is because it's rooted in something eternal. It's not just something you want, it's something that wants you. It's tied to your destiny. That's why it keeps resurfacing, even when life tries to drown it. That's why it whispers to you at night. That's why it survives disappointment. That's why it keeps pulling you forward. If God placed it in you, he intends to fulfill it through you. You don't have to pretend not to want what you want. You don't have to make yourself smaller to avoid disappointment. You don't have to silence yourself to avoid looking foolish. God is not intimidated by your longing. He is not annoyed by your desire. He is not tired of your tears. He is not offended by your questions. He is your father, and fathers pay attention to what shapes their children's hearts. Fathers respond to what burdens their children. Fathers notice what their children fear, what they dream of, what they ache for. How much more does God respond to the desires he himself placed inside you? There is a miracle moving toward you right now that is connected to your deepest desire. You don't have to chase it, manipulate it, or force it. You just have to stay open. Even in the moments when you feel forgotten, you are seen. Even in the seasons when you feel delayed, you are being developed. Even in the days when you feel overlooked, you are being observed with divine precision. God has not just heard your prayers. He has heard your heart. And he is the God who makes the unseen seen and the unspoken answered. Preparation is one of the most misunderstood seasons in a believer's life. We mistake it for delay, for denial, for distance, when in truth it is one of the most intentional moves of God. When heaven prepares you, it is never passive. It is never pointless. It is never wasted. God prepares with precision. And when he positions you for something greater, he often wraps that preparation in a season that feels like nothing is happening, nothing is moving, and nothing is changing. But beneath that stillness is strategy, and beneath that silence is shaping. What feels like the slowest chapter of your life is often the most supernatural chapter of your story. There are moments in your journey when you cry out to God asking for quick answers and immediate breakthroughs, but he responds by slowing you down instead, not because he wants to frustrate you, but because he's aligning things you don't even know you need yet. There are people you haven't met, opportunities you haven't seen, connections you haven't formed, and maturity you haven't stepped into. When you ask God for something big, he doesn't just drop it into your lap. He shapes the version of you who can carry it. The blessing is ready, but he's making sure you are too. Preparation feels like delay because it stretches you beyond your comfort zone. It stretches your patience, your faith, your understanding, your willingness to trust what you cannot see. God knows that if he gives you the promise too early, your foundation may not be strong enough to hold it. He knows the area is still fragile in you. He knows the fears that still rise when pressure hits. He knows the wounds you try to overlook, the habits you try to justify, the cycles you think you've escaped, but still have roots in your heart. Preparation is God onrushing the process so you don't collapse under the weight of the blessing you prayed for. Sometimes God delays because he is pruning. He is cutting off attachments that can't go with you, even if you wanted them to. He removes people who would poison the next level. He shuts doors you would have accepted out of desperation but would have regretted later. He closes opportunities that look good but are misaligned with your calling. He separates you from surroundings that were comfortable but not creative, familiar but not fruitful, close but not covenant. Preparation is God making sure that when your breakthrough comes, nothing around you can sabotage it. There are seasons where God hides you, and being hidden feels like being forgotten. You see others advancing, succeeding, growing, and you wonder when it will finally be your moment. But hidden seasons are holy seasons. They are seasons where God builds you in private so he can reveal you in strength. You are not buried, you are planted. Seeds don't grow in the spotlight, they grow underground where no one can applaud them but God. Preparation looks like darkness because it is deep work, it is internal work, it is foundational work. God doesn't rush the construction of what he intends to last. Sometimes you push for timing that God is protecting you from. You think you're ready, but you're ready based on desire, not development. You're ready based on excitement, not endurance. You're ready based on longing, not longevity. God sees the whole picture. He sees the parts of your character he's still strengthening, the parts of your faith he's still solidifying, the parts of your mindset he's still renewing. Preparation isn't punishment, it's protection. It's God ensuring that when he releases what he promised, you can sustain it, manage it, and multiply it instead of losing it. God uses preparation to detox you from what has been draining you. Old mindsets, old fears, old wounds, old narratives, old survival habits. So many of us have lived in survival mode so long that we don't know how to hold blessings without bracing for disappointment. We don't know how to receive without suspicion. We don't know how to trust without hesitation. Preparation is God teaching you how to stand in abundance without expecting collapse. It's God teaching you how to breathe again without the shadow of your past choking you. It's God teaching you how to step boldly without apologizing for the promise on your life. There are desires in you that require a refined version of you. The calling God placed on your life requires discipline, emotional maturity, spiritual resilience, and clarity. So God takes you through seasons that sharpen you, seasons that awaken you, seasons that strip away what would suffocate you later. You may not understand the season, but the season understands you. It is shaping you into someone who can walk in purpose without shrinking, love without fearing loss, serve without burning out, trust God without negotiating with doubt. When preparation feels like delay, remember that divine alignment is taking place in layers you cannot see. God is aligning your steps, aligning your mindset, aligning your circle, aligning your opportunities, aligning your identity with your assignment. You are not just being prepared for a blessing, you are being positioned for impact. God is not only preparing what's coming through you, He's preparing what's coming through you. Your story, your influence, your voice, your transformation. There is a version of your life that requires a stronger version of you, and God is committed to shaping that version even when you resist the process. There are times when you feel like you're moving backward, when you thought you'd be further by now, when you thought the doors would be open by now, when you thought the healing would be complete by now. But backward is often the path to deeper. God takes you inward before He takes you upward. He teaches you how to trust Him in uncertainty so you can trust Him in abundance. He teaches you how to rely on Him in weakness so you don't forget Him in strength. He teaches you how to surrender control so that when He elevates you, you don't sabotage the blessing by trying to take the steering wheel back. Preparation builds spiritual muscle in the places where you have only known spiritual strain. You may feel delayed, but you are not derailed. You may feel behind, but you are not disqualified. God is not checking a clock. He is checking readiness. And readiness is not measured by how badly you want something. It is measured by how deeply you trust Him. Preparation produces trust. Trust produces obedience. Obedience produces breakthrough. Breakthrough produces blessing. And blessing produces responsibility. God prepares you so you can be responsible with what He gives you, not overwhelmed by it. So you can walk in it confidently, not fearfully. So you can hold it with wisdom, not insecurity. There will be a day when you look back and realize the very season you hated was the season that built you. The very silence you resented was the silence that developed you. The very waiting room you felt trapped in was the room where God healed pieces of you that you didn't even know were broken. Preparation reveals purpose in hindsight. One day the dots will connect and you'll understand why God took you the long way, why He closed certain doors, why He shifted certain people, why He strengthened certain weaknesses, why He required you to sit, heal, grow, stretch, and evolve. Nothing was random. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was accidental. Everything was preparation. You don't have to fear this season. You don't have to rush what God is doing. You don't have to compare your journey to anyone else's. Divine alignment is slow but sure. It is quiet but powerful. It is hidden but holy. And when God finishes preparing you, there will be no confusion about why He took His time, because everything He promised will arrive at the exact moment you are ready to hold it, protect it, honor it, and step into it like the person He always knew you could become. A suddenly from God is never really sudden. It is the visible eruption of everything God has been cultivating beneath the surface of your surrender. It's the moment heaven's timing collides with your obedience, your waiting, your trust, your tears, and your resilience. People see the miracle, but God sees the years you spent learning how to release what was breaking you. A suddenly is not random. It is not luck. It is not coincidence. It is the divine reward of someone who has chosen trust, even when trust felt like the heaviest thing to carry. There are seasons where surrender feels like losing. You lay down your plans, your timelines, your expectations, and it feels like pieces of your identity are falling apart. You let go of relationships you wanted to keep. You surrender opportunities you thought were your doorway. You release versions of yourself you once depended on. Surrender feels like stripping. It feels like being emptied out. It feels like becoming undone. And yet God never asked you to surrender something without preparing to replace it with something greater. Surrender clears space for suddenly. It makes room for the miraculous. It opens the door for God to move in ways your strength never could. There are parts of your story where you had no idea what God was doing. You prayed and felt nothing. You believed and saw nothing. You obeyed and gained nothing. But every time you surrendered, every time you said, God, I trust you, even though I don't understand you, you shifted something in the spiritual realm. Your surrender became a seed. Your trust became a deposit. Your perseverance became a spiritual investment. And the harvest of a surrendered heart is always a suddenly moment where God reveals why the waiting was necessary, why the pruning was essential, why the silence was intentional. A suddenly miracle doesn't come to people who simply wish for change. It comes to people who have been formed by surrender, people who have been stretched, refined, purified, humbled, and strengthened, people who didn't walk away when it felt unfair, people who didn't quit when it felt painful, people who didn't retreat when they were tired, people who let God break cycles